Well, that's probably clear my phone. Okay, yes, sir. I don't have a Taco Bell.
All right, thank you for joining. We're going to get started in about 1 more minute. All right, it's noon, so let's get started. Good afternoon and welcome to Georgia DNR's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm Emily Wingo of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Floodplain Unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen only mode, so please make sure your mic is muted. If you're having any Wi-Fi issues, you may want to turn off your camera and any other programs you have running. Please make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for communications as we will not be taking questions by audio. Isabel Rogers of Dewberry is monitoring the chat and will try to help you with any technical matters. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credits for CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during this session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Please use the radio buttons to respond to the poll questions in either the pop-up window or the chat box. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. Also, a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we can help improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video to georgiadfirm.com. With that, let's get started. Today's presentation is Funding Your Flood and Water-Related Projects. Where's the money? Our presenters are Jack Krolikowski and Jared Melville with the American Flood Coalition and Barbara Stitt-Allen with Georgia's Environmental Protection Division. Jack Krolikowski is the Flood Planning Director at the American Flood Coalition, where he advances AFC's long-term strategy for promoting risk-informed flood planning at all levels of government. Prior to joining AFC, Jack was the Deputy State Hazard Mitigation Officer in Georgia, co-state lead of the Georgia Silver Jackets team with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, previously worked in Georgia's National Flood Insurance Program Office, and for a community development nonprofit in Nicaragua. Jack holds bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Jared Melville works with the American Flood Coalition's Federal Policy and Government Relations team. He consults with AFC's members and state and local organization flood challenges, develops proactive policy solutions with a focus on agriculture, data, and national flood security policy, and collaborates with congressional offices to introduce federal legislation. Jared oversees the AFC's Flood Funding Finder, a web tool that helps community level decision makers identify and prioritize federal funding opportunities. Barbara Stitt-Allen is a certified floodplain manager, works as a GIS and grant specialist in the grants unit of Georgia EPD's non-point source program. She has worked at the Georgia Environmental Protection for over 30 years with experience in drinking water, TMDL implementation, and non-point source pollution prevention, including 21 years as an environmental grant administrator and 28 years with GIS information systems. She's a graduate of Agnes Scott College with dual degrees in biology and history and has graduate work in GIS from Georgia State University. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Emily, and thanks for the chance to present. And as Emily gave the quick bio there, Jared and I do work for a Washington, D.C. based organization, but I'll tell y'all that I'm proud to be right here at home in the Peach State presenting to you guys out of Dunwoody, Georgia. So next slide, please. So you saw on the first slide there, we started off with 3 Fs, the flood funding finder, and Jared's going to be the master of that live demo here and some background on that. I was just going to give us a very quick introduction to the American Flood Coalition. So started with 3 Fs, now I'm going to give you all 3 Ns. So we are a national, nonprofit, nonpartisan, and you can see the kind of the mission statement right there: solutions to flooding and sea level rise. Couldn't be more relevant to a state like ours here in Georgia. Many of y'all know this is a very kind of exciting time in the state, or certainly a relevant time. You know, House Study Committee on Disaster Mitigation and Resilience under the Gold Dome. Maybe not quite as good news. Some of y'all may have seen the American Society of Civil Engineers report card for Georgia came out yesterday. We got a C- on stormwater, which is taking me back to those Georgia Tech days that Emily referenced in the bio. Freshman year had some C- for me as well. But about this kind of where's the money, this is about addressing those problems. AFC's work, you can see any number of these sort of pillars that we support these partners on. 400 plus members across the country, really focused on any number of levels, whether those are federal champions in DC, local governments have a couple of members here in Georgia, even elected officials. We'll touch on that in the next slide. Chambers of Commerce, military preparedness, and of course, kind of those kind of civic university partners as well. Next slide, please. So quick glance, as I said, 400 plus members, nearly 24 states, inland, coastal, of course, states like our own that are both. You can see, you know, some of those examples of our federal champions, Georgia's own Representative Carter, neighboring as well. Coalition members, kind of got a grab bag here of members, but just highlighting coastal, inland, rural, big urban, whatever it looks like. We've got members both on the community side. You can see that from Clyde, North Carolina, that's up in the mountains a little bit west of Asheville, all the way to Charleston, which, as we all know, significant flood relevancy there. This is not a pitch about y'all joining AFC. That's not a part of it at all. We'd love to have you join. I'll say there are no fees. It really is about kind of buying in on these solutions. But again, Jared and I don't work on commission about enrolling members. That's not what we're here for. We're really here to share the tool. But to the extent it's something that may be of interest to y'all, please feel free to follow up. Of course, you have our contact information. So as I'm going to get ready to transfer over to Jared here, but just a couple of top lines. This tool, the Flood Funding Finder, it's really meant to be your first step. This is meant to make your life a little bit easier in terms of sorting through all the federal funding options that exist. That said, it's never going to be a full replacement for that program specific knowledge. So always, I would encourage folks, follow up with the Barbaras of the world, follow up with the Stephen Clarks over at Georgia Emergency Management of the world, follow up with the folks at GFA, Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, if you highlight one of these pieces, right? Can never replace some of that specific timely elements for that. And the other piece I'm going to say, you know, I'm here sharing, as I said, from Dunwoody, Georgia, a community with a big staff, lots of resources. As we recognize in a state with 159 communities, Dunwoody's not representative of our state as a whole, right? There's a lot more Dublins and Dudleys than there are Dunwoodies, right? So this tool is really meant to step into that gap for those folks that just don't have full-time staff to do this type of work. So the only ask I'm going to make of you guys, I said I'm not going to ask anybody to join. That's the case. I will ask y'all to share this with your neighboring communities who might not have been able to join today at lunch, and especially with the regional commissions. I think we all know those regional commissions can kind of be a force multiplier in getting the word out there. So to the extent that Jared impresses y'all, which I expect to be the case, please take me up on that homework assignment and share this resource, particularly with the regional commission and your neighbors. So I'm going to turn it over to Jared, and again, appreciate the chance to share with y'all today.
Thank you very much, Jack. We could go to the next slide. So at the American Flood Coalition, we've over the years created several publicly available resources, from research in how flood resilient infrastructure creates jobs, to a guide for local leaders breaking down 24 different types of flood adaptation projects. We also have blogs that delve into topics such as how agriculture can be, as part of a watershed management approach, can be a solution to flooding, as well as to dives into different states and approaches they're taking to addressing flooding at a statewide scale. But our focus for today is our flood funding finder tool. So although knowing what the solutions are to flooding is important, one key aspect to all of this work is answering the question, how are we going to pay for it? So we will focus on how AFC and the Flood Funding Finder can support you in accessing federal funding and resources. Next slide. Right now, we're in a once-in-a-generation moment between congressional appropriations, the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the Inflation Reduction Act. There are significant dollars available to support flood resilience. The federal government has more than 900 programs spread out across dozens of agencies. So there are resources available now to help communities prepare for and become more resilient to flooding. But it is time-consuming and confusing to actually find and apply for these programs, especially for smaller and lower resource communities who might not have a grants specialist on staff. On top of all of that, all of these different programs have different eligibility requirements, different applications, and they fund different types of projects. If you go to grants.gov and search for flooding, you'll return 100 different results, and many of those are not true results for what you're looking for what you're searching for, and it's difficult to sort through. So that can leave many asking, and certainly a question we at AFC have received many times over the years: where do I begin? Well, next slide. That's where the Flood Funding Finder fits in. The Flood Funding Finder is an interactive website that simplifies the search for federal grants and helps communities identify and prioritize opportunities to fund flood resilience. I think Jack gave a really good foreword, is that this is one of the first steps that you could take to finding different flood funding options, maybe a 10,000-foot view before you make the decision, I want to learn more about this funding opportunity, or I want to talk to this network connection I have in my state, in Georgia, to figure out more about this program. So you can access this website by going to the Flood Coalition's website, or you can go scan the QR code that you see on your slide here with your smartphone. If you want to, you can go into another browser tab and start playing around with the tool, or open it up on your smartphone while I'm talking. We'll do a walkthrough of the website, but if you want, I'd rather see you going onto the website perhaps than hearing me talk about the website. So feel free to choose your own adventure with that. I will note that when we go through the walkthrough on the website, it'll look a little bit different than what you'll see on your smartphone, but we'll cross that bridge in a little bit. The Flood Funding Finder is unique in that there isn't a dedicated federal grants database that's focused solely on flood resilience funding. When available, we'll post upcoming application deadlines, we'll cite case examples of federal programs being used for flood resilience, and we'll summarize federal programs so that you don't have to read a 100-page federal notice before knowing, is this program even right for my community? So Isabel, if you can stop sharing your screen, I'll start sharing mine, and we can walk through the website together. Oh, well, that's unfortunate on the QR code, but I will post that website into the chat right now. You can go to, on your smartphone, floodcoalition.org/funding finder, and that will also take you to the website. Great. So after sifting through hundreds of different programs across dozens of agencies, we've identified 25 federal funding opportunities that have a trend of providing assistance to communities for flood projects. I'll take a moment to walk through the website and orient you to what's on the screen. So on the left side of the page is a filters panel that you can use to narrow your results. Clicking on any of the filters will reduce this list to a smaller one to help you sort through those options. And then on the middle right of the screen, you'll see a complete set of 25 federal programs, along with a table of program characteristics that match the filters on the left that might be of interest to you, to sorting through what program does what. Once you've filtered your programs, you can learn about each of them by clicking on their name, and that will open up a new page. Once you land on the website, you'll also see this Help Me Choose button on the top left of the filters panel. And that'll walk you through each of these filters and how selecting them affects the search results. So we created this tool after hearing from our members that they need to figure out which grants allow for flood resilience as an eligible use, and then to sort through that list to figure out what might be best for their community needs. So let's give that a shot right now and open that Help Me Choose button to find a program. So the program has different filters to highlight specific program characteristics and requirements, such as whether a program doesn't require a local cost share from smaller communities, or if a program focuses on environmental restoration. Let's select this one option here for in-kind services contribute toward non-federal cost share requirements. Let's say that hypothetically, I'm a community, we don't have a lot of cash reserves on hand, but we do have staff time available to contribute as part of a non-federal match requirement. We can scroll to the bottom and click Next. And then we'll be prompted to filter for grants based on what phase you're at in terms of your flood resilience journey. Do you need to gather data about the local impacts of flooding? Or are you doing pre-construction activities, designing a project? Or are you ready to break ground and begin implementing or constructing a project? This example, let's click the Design and Planning box and then click Get Your Results. So this has reduced that list of 25 programs to, looks like, about a dozen. There's a sampling of programs from FEMA, from NOAA, HUD, EDA, etc. Let's click on the Economic Development Administration's Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Program. So each program in the Flood Funding Finder has its own page that provides essential information. We design these pages with the intention of giving users just enough information to decide whether the program may be a good fit for them and whether they should apply. We post application deadlines for the program's most recent application cycle. Even if a deadline has passed, application cycles sometimes open around the same time each year, so this can be useful information to help you plan ahead for the next cycle. At the top of the page, you'll see a quick summary, so you can decide whether this program might be a good fit and whether you want to read further on the page. Programs might provide different levels of funding for different projects or priorities, and we spelled that out for you here on the page. Zoom in a little more. Sometimes the most important information for a community is whether a program requires a local cost share. Some programs might offer higher federal cost share for some communities, especially for smaller communities or lower resource communities. There's filters that help you find those programs, but we also include those details on these pages. So, for example, for this EDA program, if a community has exhausted their other options for funding a project, EDA might award a higher level of federal cost share, up to 100%. And then each page also lists eligible activities. So our goal is to explain how these programs can be used for flood resilience. And we'll often back that up by citing a case example of some successful projects. So in the instance of this EDA program, we cited an example from Arcadia, Wisconsin, a very small community that received $4.3 million for a stormwater project. We like to cite a broad variety of examples. So if you're looking through the website and you see a program that you or a community you work with has successfully received funding for, and you want to be featured in the tool, please reach out to me or please reach out to Jack, and we can talk about putting that example in the tool in our website. We're always trying to add more information that might be useful for different types of communities and website users. And then at the bottom of the page is application process information, where you can go to the program's website and learn more about applying for the program. Some other interesting features on the website, there's also an option to generate a PDF of your search results. So let's say I have filtered for programs that have both a disaster declaration, your community's been involved in a presidentially declared disaster, and you want implementation funding or construction funding. We get 4 results there. You can click view your results as a PDF. The website will take a moment to create your PDF, and then you've just created a custom PDF that generates some background information about the Flood Funding Finder and about the American Flood Coalition, but then it provides a PDF version of what you've seen on the website. So if you ever need to print this information out to give to a decision maker or for a meeting, this is an option that is available for you there too. One more quick example, you could also just adjust your search results on the fly by using the filters panel. So we could click environmental restoration, and then let's click implementation. There you get a decently short list of results. Click into the EPA's Environmental Education Grants Program. You can see here, this is an example of, this is a program focused on fostering a sense of environmental stewardship in a community. Here's an example of a program that typically opens along similar schedule each year. So you could look to say, this one will open later on in September. If I want a program to focuses on environmental awareness and community stewardship, maybe I start looking into this program now, talking with, I don't know, Barbara, if you work with the environmental education program at all, but might be an opportunity there. So I'll stop sharing my screen here so that Isabel can open up her version of the deck. And that's the introduction to the Flood Funding Finder. That's a tool you can use to find federal dollars to pay for local, state, and regional flood resilience projects. As Jack said, this is going to be kind of a first step before you go to grants.gov or start pouring into each of the state or federal agency websites to find flood resilience projects. We built this tool in response to our members' call to make federal grant funding more accessible. We know it's not a perfect solution, but it can be a helpful first step. If you have any questions at any point, you can reach out to me or Jack, or you can reach out to my team at AFC by emailing fff@floodcoalition.org. So thank you for your time. Don't know if we have any time for questions, but if not, I can hand it over to Barbara, who I'm sure will give you a much more in-depth explanation about some of the different funding opportunities for some of the specific programs that we feature on this website.
Thank you, Jared. Oh my gosh, I love y'all's tool. That is fantastic. I'm always learning new new resources, and I'm always adding them. So I'm going to be adding your tool to my presentation. I'm always tweaking this presentation. So hi, y'all. I'm Barbara Stiddown with Georgia EPD. I've got a 3-year career at Georgia EPD doing all things water. But one of the things I really, really enjoy about my career right now is helping local communities get the funding to address their water needs, whether it be non-point source or drinking water or wastewater, or definitely stormwater. I was kind of concerned when if I overheard right, Jack said Georgia got a C- in stormwater. Was that correct? If that's true, we got a lot of work ahead of us, y'all. So let's talk about the different sources in Georgia. This is specific to Georgia, okay? So next slide, please. Yes. So this is what I'm going to go over real quick. I'm going to talk about national and state funding sources that I have seen used by grantees in the state of Georgia. Then I'm going to talk about my 2 grants, which is 319 non-point source pollution grant, which we will fund green infrastructure projects, which also goes with stormwater, which also kind of overlaps with flooding. And I've seen we're all kinds of trying to address the same thing, which is too much water. All right. I'm also going to talk about the regional water seed grants. That's something very specific to Georgia. I'm just going to talk about some other grant resources, and then I'm going to give you some advice on how to do a grant application, how you, as a small government with limited resources, can approach applying for grants. All right. All right. Next slide, please. All right. So, of course, where you start, of course, you use this fantastic tool that Jared just demonstrated. I'm so happy you demonstrated it, Jared. Start there, play around with it, see what you can find, and then come and talk to individuals like myself. Okay, we're happy to work. A lot of times, these federal programs, the money actually will come to a state or some other type of government agency that holds the money and then parcels the money out. So come talk to us at the state level so we can help you. Of course, in terms of flooding, I think everyone's pretty familiar with GEMA. GEMA, Jack mentioned it earlier. GEMA, of course, we have the BRIC program, the pre-hazardous mitigation, the hazardous mitigation. If you're part of the flood insurance program, I'm pretty sure you're familiar with some of these programs. They have a wonderful, wonderful staff all across the state that will help you with your projects having to do with flooding. That includes pre-hazardous mitigation type projects, which can be now green infrastructure. All right. Next slide, please. Okay, Barbara, where do you start? Anytime I get calls, Barbara, where do I start? I have no training. I don't know what to do. Jared mentioned grants.gov. And I agree with Jared. Grants.gov is just a huge, massive database that sometimes it's hard to shift through. But one thing that I have mentioned to people about grants.gov is they have a fantastic training module called Grants 101 that you can go in, and it's geared toward, of course, applying using this webpage, but it also helps you and gives you approaches and ideas of how to approach your application and what grantors are looking for. So I often tell people, if you're just starting off, go to grants.gov and just get an idea of what it takes to actually apply and do a grant. So I'm going to start off with that source. Next slide. Then EPA. Okay, I work a lot with EPA. So anytime people are talking to me about water, I'm immediately, of course, thinking about the Clean Water SRF and Drinking Water SRF and various other programs like that. EPA will sometimes, and I find this sometimes with Region 4, EPA will sometimes have like little special grants that are for the regions and Region 4. So sometimes I will tell people, go look at the EPA website and see if there's like some one-off grant that it's probably in grants.gov, but you just can't find it because it's just so much in grants.gov. But if you're looking for something with water and flooding, stormwater related, I also tell people just go to EPA and see if there's something else that's administered by EPA and not at the state level. Hopefully something like this would also pop up in Jared's fantastic tool he just demoed. All right, next slide. All right, I want y'all to be aware of something we do here in Georgia. It's the Georgia Funders Forum. This is a group that's made up of individuals like myself who are grantors. We are the people that award funding. We started off, gosh, this has been over 10 years now, maybe 15 years ago. The Georgia Funders Forum is now actually part of GIFA, but they do some amazing, amazing work. And we get together, those of us that are grantors, we get together to talk to one another and find out about different sources of funding. I'm actually going to talk to Jared about doing a presentation of the Funders Forum. And we also maintain, can I have a next slide, please? We maintain it's really an Excel spreadsheet. There it is. We maintain a spreadsheet that's more geared toward Georgia, that shows the different types of funding that's available. Now, this is not just funding for flood projects, but it's more or less all things water. And so on the Georgia Funders Forum, you can find this list that's available. There's a lot of overlap with what Jared just talked about, but I would recommend you start with Jared's tool and then come work your way down and come look at this list and then come talk to me. All right, next slide. Okay, so let's talk about sources of funding that I have seen that we've been using in Georgia. All right, so rural development grants. The USDA is often, you think about them as agricultural, but they also have an incredible water and environmental program grant where this is actually geared towards smaller municipalities, cities and counties and such. There is a population criteria. I think it's 25,000. Some are 10,000. But the purpose of this is actually water, wastewater, and they do have a portion that is for stormwater, i.e. flooding. The guy that used to run this program, who's now since retired, told me that every year they get applicants for the water and wastewater, but they really don't ever get applicants for the stormwater. And I'm just making this available, but the thing is local governments just didn't even know. So I'm making you aware that if you are a smaller government, go talk to USDA. Now, they do have loans, but they do also have really, really low interest rates. So if you're a small government, I would start also with USDA. All right, next slide. All right, of course, PCA. If you're a local government, I'm sure you're aware of community block grants that come through HUD. All right. The community block grants, of course, do wonderful things with redevelopment. We see things with the revitalization of downtown, putting in parks and things like that. But the community development grant, the community block grants also can do water, wastewater, and stormwater. Again, it's not as well known. Usually what they do is, I've had a couple projects like this where there's redevelopment, and instead of putting in a typical like stormwater pond or something like that, they'll put in green infrastructure. So you can find yourself, maybe if you have a bigger project that has some sort of flooding or stormwater element to it, you might want to look and see if BCA can help you out with that. All right, next slide. All right. Okay. Oh, here we go. The Georgia, now this, I've mentioned this earlier, this is GIFA, the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, which it's EPD. When I was in drinking water, we called them the bank. They're the ones that actually hold our clean water state revolving fund and the drinking water state revolving fund. When GIFA was formed, the purpose of it was really to help distribute these funds to medium and smaller municipalities. Unfortunately, over the years, though, because it's a loan, a lot of this funding has actually gone to some of the bigger cities. So GIFA really is now trying to target smaller communities. So yes, it's a loan, and that actually is something that will discourage smaller communities from even working with GIFA because they think they can't afford a loan. But GIFA also has some programs for principal forgiveness through some of their programs. And the one thing I say to everybody, especially if you have a flooding issue, is the Clean Water SRF has a set aside for non-point source stormwater green infrastructure, i.e. flooding type of projects. And over the years, I think this year they spent it all, but over the years they struggled actually getting municipalities to come and apply for those funds. So if you actually, and the great thing also is if you're a community that already has a GIFA loan, say for your drinking water or your wastewater, you can actually work with them and they can probably add in some additional funds to your current loan or what else you've already done. You don't have to go through the whole process, for those funds for stormwater. All right. Just want you to be aware of that. A lot of times, again, a lot of times I talk to people and they're like, I can't afford a loan. Just take a step and just go talk to them, because there's lots of wonderful, wonderful individuals at GIFA that really, really want to help you. All right. Especially here in Georgia. All right. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. The Clean Water SRF. You can go ahead and keep going. Oh, Water First. Okay. This is unique. Well, I think it's unique to Georgia. GIFA now administers the Water First program. And the Water First program is a statewide program for handling all things water, your water resources and all type of things. And what it is, it does ask local communities, it requires local communities to adopt ordinances and various things and such like that. But if you become a Water First community, and GIFA is really pushing this, if you become a Water First community, not only do you get a discount on your loan rate from GIFA, you get priority funding from my program 319. And there's also other, again, this kind of came out of the Georgia Funder Forum. Actually, if you become a Water First community, other programs look upon that as very favorable. So if you might want to look into and talk to GIFA, because you might be halfway there of meeting all the requirements for Water First. And then, of course, you get a cool sign and it looks good for your community. But then you get a discount on your loan. So I always mention Water First anytime I do these discussions. All right, next slide. All right, this is me. Okay, I'm taking my time. Okay, this is me. I'm going to real quickly talk about the Section 319 non-point source implementation grant, which is federal money that comes to the state of Georgia, and then we have competitive money. We have competitive process to distribute out the money. And then the Regional Water Plan Seed Grant. This is a state funding. All right, next slide. All right, real quick. I'm going to go through some of these slides really quickly. So purpose of this is to address impaired waters. If you're a local community, you probably have heard of the 303D list, which is the list that we put out every 2 years that pretty much says this stream in your community is not meeting, the water level it should be for pollution. It might be kind of on the polluted side. Do you really want to drink in that? Do you want to drink that? Do you want to swim in that? So we put this list out every year and we ask local communities, hey, you need to do something about this polluted stream, okay? And that's what my grant is for. It's trying to fix non-point source issues with your stream. Okay. One of the things that this requires, you have to implement a watershed-based plan. Now, I get pushback on this. It's like, oh, I don't have a plan. Let me tell you, in the state of Georgia, if you do not think you have a plan, I can find you a plan. Okay, next slide. All right. These are tons of plans that your community may already have. All right. So we've already done TMDLs and TMDL implementation plans. If you're a wastewater, if you have a wastewater permit and you're a certain size, you probably have a watershed protection plan that's required by EPD. If you're in the Metro District, you probably have a watershed improvement plan. If you're an MS4, you probably have a stormwater management program that actually, in a sense, is a plan. Of course, there's a regional water councils, which I will talk about in just a minute. But my point, though, is you might actually have a capital improvement plan. You might have a capital improvement plan. So don't think just because, oh, I don't have a plan that's just for water. You probably do. And that's a requirement from EPA, but we will work with you to show you how we can do a summary, pulling plans together that will satisfy the requirement from EPA. So don't let that be a stumbling block, all right? We do try to focus on a watershed that's on the HUC 10 level or even smaller, about a HUC 12 level. All right, next slide. Oh, here we go. All right. Again, like I said, we addressing impaired waters, planning is a 60-40 cost share. We actually used to have a $400,000 cap, but now we've raised that. So we're accepting projects now up to $1 million. So if you have a stormwater green infrastructure project and there is an impaired stream, that drains to an impaired stream or addresses an impaired stream, please come talk to us. We like projects that engage with multiple partners. 319 in Georgia, this is specific to Georgia. 319 cannot fund nonprofits. That's just a specific thing to Georgia. So we encourage our applicants, which are usually local governments, regional commissions, RC&Ds, to work with nonprofits and any type of environmental groups in the area. We're looking for water quality improvement. We're paying for stuff to be put in the ground to fix your stormwater and flooding problems that will also lead to water quality improvement. If we're slowing the water down, we're not eroding the stream bank, getting all that sediment in the stream now. We're not, if we finally handle our water, we're not draining into our wastewater lines and causing floods, causing spills and such. All right, so we're looking for a sustainable water quality improvement. We do sometimes collect water quality data. Again, our focus is putting in best management practices, which can be green infrastructure. All right, next slide. All right, so if you're in Georgia and you, of course, going to put in some sort of green infrastructure, you probably have seen some of this. This is the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual, especially if you're in MS4. All right, the Georgia Stormwater Management Manual, this actually is on the ARC website. These are all the different green infrastructure type BMPs that is in the Stormwater Management Manual. Guess what? These are very similar BMPs that also FEMA is looking at. These are very similar type of BMPs that I'm pretty sure some of the other funding programs would be happy to also fund. All right, so these are the things that we are funding. And if you're already, like I said, an MS4, you already have this stormwater manual that gives you an idea of what you can put in using our funding. All right, next slide. Okay. It's so boring looking at just boring slides. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. Okay. So I'm just showing you some example projects that are green infrastructure that 319 has done here in Georgia. Okay. This is the constructed wetland in Sandy Springs on Marsh Creek. All right. This originally, there was a park. There is a park here, but originally they had an issue with a lot of it's kind of on a hill and there was a lot of flooding coming off that hill. So they put in a constructive wetland. You can see that little wet area. That was what we paid for. And so now when that water comes rushing down, it collects now on this constructive wetland and it does, it seeps into the ground like it's supposed to. That's an example of a project. Next slide. This is the Boone Boulevard. I love this thing. These are tree cells. They're called linear tree cells. And what it is they put in these cells on the sides of Boone Boulevard. This is in Proctor Creek. And so when it rains, the water gets captured in the first cell and then works its way down in the different cells and then goes into the media down below. There was actually some flooding over in this area not too long ago, and these things actually did work pretty darn well. It's also been nice because it's made, when you're planting trees and putting in greenery and all that, it's actually made the neighborhood, it's been kind of an amenity now to the neighborhood. Again, this is an example of something that we pay for. All right, next slide. That's just a sign that shows that the stormwater planters have never seen these before. Next slide. All right, here's another. Oh, this is the city of Roswell. We've helped them put in permeable pavers around an area that is kind of, again, a little bit of a hill, and then there's a Hogwaller Creek, which was kind of at the end of the hill. And again, this was part of a bigger redevelopment that they did in kind of their old historic part of Roswell. And they dug up a bunch of pavement and they put in the pavers. And it's really been successful. I think they've now, I think they're considering doing it elsewhere in the city. Again, this was a 319 project. All right, next slide, please. All right, this is actually my project. This is Gainesville, Flat Creek Restoration. So this was Flat Creek. Flat Creek does not look too good. Yes, this is an area that was an old industry area in Gainesville. As you can see, the creek has been channelized and, of course, concrete and all that. And they had some flooding with the area. And there is an old mill pond in the area that also was causing issues and everything. Okay, next slide. There's a mill pond. Then what a mill pond is, you can see the factory in the back. The mill pond was there in case there's a fire. This was before there's fire hydrants and all that. Okay, next slide. This is after. This is a stream restoration that was done. They went in and actually took out all the concrete and rebuilt the stream and put in the meanders. They put in the J-hooks. They put in all different wonderful things. And I've gone out there since then and found minnows now in this creek. They've done a wonderful job, and they rebuilt. Guess what? They rebuilt the floodplain. So now, when the water comes running off, yes, that's a chicken plant in the back. But now, when the water comes running off, there's now an actual floodplain for the water to overflow. And next slide. This is the mill pond. The mill pond, they actually completely drained it, dug it out, and recreated a stormwater pond. Now, this whole area. And this is not necessarily this is kind of I guess you say it's not a poor area, but it's not exactly a rich area. I think it'd be more kind of a middle class area. Now this is a park, and now it's an amenity for the neighborhood, and it's actually been quite successful. All right, next slide. All right. Let's jump into the other grant that I administer, which is a regional water plan seed grant. This is a state funded grant. All right. So what this is there are 10 regional water planning councils around the state. The council members are usually appointed. And then every 5 years, this is a state requirement, we have to do a regional water plan for that area. Okay. And this is an example of what the plans look like. And the plans are very broad. They're very broad. And I tell people it's all things water. All right. And I tell people that if they have a project, if you got a planning project, this thing can pay for almost anything. The focus of the plans and the focus of the management measures is to address critical information that we're missing, looking at monitoring data. It says preparing and distributing technical guidance, providing technical assistance. We've used this funding for a lot of different things. We've now been doing this for about 10 years. All right, next slide. All right, these are the regional water plan councils. A lot of times when I do this presentation and I'm talking to individuals like yourself, it's interesting. Sometimes the audience has heard of this and they heard of their councils, and sometimes the audience had no idea. I just want you to be aware that you do live somewhere in a regional water planning council. And these are all the councils. Of course, then there's the Metro District. All right, here's a caveat. The seed grant won't pay for projects in the Metro District. However, if the project is in the Metro District and it drains to, say, the next county over, and it drains to a county that is the regular regional water planning district, and that district, that council determines that project would be favorable, we can fund things like that. But again, I just want you to be aware geographically where you are in your regional water council, okay? Because that's important if you're going to apply for this grant. Next slide. All right, this is an example of what the plan looks like. They have updated it. This is the Upper Oconee one, just to kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. And in these plans, there is a section 6 and a section 7. Section 6 is what I would call management measures, and section 7 is the implementation. If you go and you look at the management measures, you will find almost all of these plans have some sort of management measure having to do with stormwater ordinances, developing stormwater plans, guidance, flooding, lots of things with flooding. Almost every single one of them have this, okay? So you go and you find your management measure, you look at the implementation schedule, and then you come and apply. That's how simple this can be. If you have some sort of project that fits one of these management measures. And like I said, it's really flexible. All right, next slide. But here's the issue. It's 60-40, and there's only a $75,000 limit. You know, and that's not a lot of money. I mean, I understand that. So how it works with the 60-40, and also there's a 10% cash match. That has been a stumbling block I have found trying to work with smaller local communities that may be interested in this, but they don't have the 10% cash match because they have other priorities. We understand that. And the 10% cash match is of the total. However, we have worked our way around it and found some really unique ways of helping communities find the cash match. Sometimes it's blocks. Sometimes we've let local governments buy the equipment needed. So there are ways we can help you find this cash match. I have found, and I have recommended this to a lot of smaller governments. If you are becoming an MS4, like you're going to have to become covered by the stormwater permit now, this thing, you can use this grant to help develop your asset management plan, because you're going to have some sort of asset management system and an asset management plan to find all of your stormwater outfalls and various things and all that. So a couple communities have actually used Regional Water Plan C grant to help develop that plan and buy some of the GIS equipment and such that they need to administer their stormwater permit. Again, it doesn't, even if it's a permit related, this grant can pay for it. I was in a water first training. About a couple of weeks ago, and I heard the gentleman say, "I just need $20,000." And I started talking to him. He had no idea. He was a drinking water operator. He had no idea about this. So, like I said, it can pay for all things water. Yeah, again, it has to be in the water plan, and again, it has to be. I get a letter endorsement from the council chair. Hey, and we're about to start accepting applications in July 2020. Next slide, please. All right, I need to wrap this up. All right, really quickly. Thank you, Jared, for mentioning environmental education. Absolutely, we are very much involved with environmental education in Georgia. I also want to mention that the environmental education in Georgia, they actually have their own list of grants, and I call these micro grants. So, and these are also available for nonprofits, but they're also available for some small communities also. So sometimes I get phone calls, like I got a phone call one time, somebody wanted to apply for a C grant, but they just needed it for like something to do pollinators or something like that. And I sent them here. So I'm just making sure y'all are aware of this. All right, next slide. I just became aware of this a couple of weeks ago. The River Network, this is a national group. The River Network also has a, it's kind of similar to what Jared has, but they also have under Our Impact, they also have a great database, and kind of similar, where you can go in and search for different grants. It's really a great database also. It's just another tool for you to use. Jared's is, more, Jared's is more towards flooding, but there's a lot of overlap with environmental restoration that River Network also does. So I just want to make sure y'all are aware of this particular website also. Next slide. And then real quickly, if you still need more training, this is fantastic. Candid is an organization that is dedicated to help nonprofits get grants. So they have lots of wonderful training available on their website. All right, keep going. I need to keep going. Next slide. All right, so here's my final spill. All right, as a grantor, I'm giving you guys some advice, and this applies across the board. Okay, what are the 3 things you should know or do before
Barbara, you just got muted.
All right. Read the guidelines. Make sure your grant fits the criteria, mission, and goals of the grant. Make sure your project fits it. Okay. I see people sometimes scattershot projects out, and it's obvious they never like read the guidelines. So save yourself some time there. Okay. If you're not sure, reach out to the contact person of the grant announcement, and there's always somebody, and discuss your project. On the other end of an announcement, there's always an individual like myself, or same thing with GMA and same thing with Chifa, who would be happy to talk to you about your project. All right. Know your deadlines, okay, and submit the right attachments with the supporting documents. If the project says, have a certain document, be sure you submit it, because those are important. And my last final spill, I always say to people, especially when it comes to flooding and stormwater projects, okay, make your project fit the grant. My grant is non-point source. Your project might be stormwater, but it may have a water quality non-point source element to it. Make your project fit non-point source. Make your project fit flooding if that's what's needed. Make your project fit stormwater if that grant is focusing on stormwater. Okay, because there's so much overlap, and honestly, there's a lot of times there's a lot of money out there that we just want to get into the hands of local communities that need it, but we just have to help you just tweak your language to make sure it fits our grant. Okay, and I think that's all. Next slide. Thanks, Melvin. All right, and that is me. If you have any questions, you're feel free to email me or send the chat. I can share things later.
Also, Barbara, I have your polling questions. So for the CFMs, if you'd like to receive a 1-hour CFM continuing education credit, please answer the poll question that I will launch now in the webinar. If the poll doesn't appear as a pop-up, then please type your answer in the chat for credit, and we'll give a few moments for you to review and answer the question. Okay, if the last few people want to get their answer in, I'm going to go ahead and close it. And then it looks like we have around 30% of people here who are consultants or contractors, 39% who are with a city or county with an MS4 permit, about 4% from cities or counties not covered by an MS4 permit, and then about 26% falling into other. And then in interest of time, I'll just go to the next poll question. Let me launch that one really quick.
That should be the easy one.
Alrighty, and I am going to go ahead and close this one now too. Thank you everyone for your answers. Okay, that one is closed. And then I will switch back to your presentation, Barbara, back to questions. And then Emily, if you have any closing remarks.
Yes. Thank you, Jack, Jared, and Barbara for that very informative webinar. I hope everyone has enjoyed the presentation as much as I have. We will keep the chat open for a few more seconds. So if you've got any questions, you can throw them in there. Just be sure to include your email so that we can follow up with you. Be sure to mark your calendars for September 11th from 12 to 1 for our next Lunch and Learn webinar where Dill Schwalz will be providing insights on the Elevation Certificate Guidebook. Please make note of the registration link for the next webinar and the survey link. Isabel, if you'll throw those in the chat as well on the screen. We will be asking everyone to complete that survey so that we can improve these webinars. Again, we're offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for today's session, available to certified floodplain managers that completed the polling questions and provide their name and email in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you requested continuing education credits, those certificates will be emailed separately. Once more, our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for September 11th, so be on the lookout for that invitation. And with that, thank you again for attending today's event. For those of you who don't have any questions, this ends our Lunch and Learn webinar. Have a great day, everybody.